my Bill 1000 Nation. How's everyone doing today? Hopefully, everyone's having a great day. If not, I hope it gets better from here. We are back with another Coffeehouse Crime. This one's titled The Jealous Killer That Tried to Confuse His Way Out. Hell, just reading the title, I'm confused. Alright, I'm excited. Let's go ahead and get into today's story. Go ahead. Turn them lights down low. Put on something comfy, cup with someone special. Let's just get mentally mind fucked. I mean, that's what Coffeehouse Crime does to me, man. Like, it never fails. I come out this just like, huh? Every time. So I really enjoy it. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. I'm ready. I'm not ready.
In the world of music, where passion harmonizes with rivalry, two musicians found themselves entangled in a discordant symphony of hatred. Raymond Henry Muller had recently lost it all. His wife had left him, his children were gone, and his stability was non-existent. So when the young Cedric Gagnon joined his band with better skills and multiple women at his fingertips, Raymond could not stand the jealousy. And sadly, all of this would end in a bitter tragedy. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, folks. My name is Adrian, and welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime. Today, we're looking at the twisted case of Raymond Muller. We're getting straight into this one today, folks, but just to let you know, I post up to 4 times a week here, so if you do like darkly fascinating stories, please consider subscribing. And now, with that said, please grab yourself a coffee, pull up a seat, and get ready for the deep dive. This is the case of Raymond Muller.
Raymond Muller. Mr. Bejeweled.
Hey there, folks. Today, we're returning to the vast and wild country of Canada. Now, if you're a regular here to Coffeehouse Crime, you already know that I've covered many cases in this country. Although Canadians are often known to be polite and forgiving, let me tell you, some of your true crime stories here are quite literally insane, and our case today is no different. So, here's the country's rundown. The nation boasts remarkable wilderness, expansive plains, and majestic mountains, all of which that are complemented by a captivating history that attracts many visitors every year. Canada, I'm looking forward to seeing you in spring 2024. Speaking of, does anyone know where to grab a good cup of coffee in Toronto? I'm kind of lost here. Anyway, today's case pulls us to the beautiful city of Montreal. It's the second largest city in the country, and while Ottawa may be the actual capital of Canada, Montreal is known to be the country's prime spot for culture. The city hosts various festivals yearly, comprising dance, theatre, art, and, most importantly to this story, music. Speaking of music, our case today focuses on the complicated relationship of two rather unique bandmates, that being Raymond Henry Muller and Cedric Gagnon. First off, the band they were in was quite unique, to say the least. Well, they didn't really call it a band actually, but more of a creative collective. And even more unusual was that the collective was a pirate-themed group creatively named Pirates. That's with an exclamation point at the end, by the way, but unless I shouted, and I don't want to upset Nero, I don't think you'd have known that. So, as you can probably tell, they were not in the same league as One Direction, Taylor Swift, or Led Zeppelin. In fact, they were merely just a group of friends who got gigs wherever they could. So let's begin with Raymond. Raymond was a 51-year-old bass player who, before moving to Montreal, toured Canada out of an old school bus. Surprisingly, he did this with his wife and 4 children. They travelled around the country for several years, typically parking up in the city.
I don't think I could do that with an old lady and 4 kids. No, that's some tight quarters, man. I'm just saying.
For multiple months at a time. During one of their journeys, the strain on the couple sadly reached a breaking point, which was exacerbated by the challenging circumstances of raising a family of 6 on a school bus. The situation was further complicated by Raymond's bouts of heavy drinking, and consequently, his wife reached a breaking point and would decide to relocate with their 4 children to Ottawa. Soon after this, in 2016, Raymond found himself in trouble when he was arrested for dangerously operating a motor vehicle. And before you ask, yes, that was with his old tattered school bus. This incident would actually lead to a dramatic police chase, during which he skillfully maneuvered his rundown bus through studded carpets. Several dramatic moments later, the bus ultimately came to a halt only when confronted by a police barricade. Raymond eventually pleaded guilty to this charge, but in doing so,
I mean, if that was the actual like bus, it kind of looked like it had some bullet holes in that shit too, didn't it, bro? Son of a bitch.
Granted himself an absolute discharge, allowing him to avoid jail narrowly. He would also claim that the reason he was speeding was because his child was sick at the time and he was rushing them to the hospital. This has never been confirmed or denied, but personally speaking, I think it's baloney. You know, I always find it kind of funny when some people can't take accountability for their actions. No, they either have to make themselves out as the victim or the hero. Anyway, this brings us to the year 2018, when Raymond moved into a shared apartment found on Bernard East Street, located in Montreal. And the reason he moved here was to be with the rest of the band, Pirates. After selling his bus to get by financially, the band shared this space as a home and a studio. And while here, they affectionately named the apartment the Rock Hotel. As the name might suggest, this space was not just to live in. It was frequently used by other band members who would crash here when they were down on their luck. And one of those bandmates that was often going through a hard patch was 39-year-old Cedric Gagnon. Now, Cedric was a more recent addition to the group, and often found himself homeless with nowhere to go. As a result, he would often opt to take advantage of the group and crash at the apartment rent-free. Now, despite his status as a freeloader, Cedric displayed a remarkable music talent. He was proficient in various instruments, including the guitar and bass guitar, and rather concerning for Raymond, he seemed to mirror the skills of his bandmates. As a dedicated music enthusiast, Cedric's life orbited around the art. When not practicing or performing, he would immerse himself in attending gigs and festivals nationwide. That being, of course, whenever he could afford it. He was extremely loyal to the band too, and his friends often described him as being pirate to the core and really believing in the band's potential. And although Cedric didn't have much to give, he was very generous with what he physically did have. Put quite simply, he would give the shirt off of his back to help any of his friends out. Thankfully, his friends were very understanding of his situation. They knew he was a complicated person, but didn't have the means to support himself, and so, quite compassionately, his bandmates would let him lean on them for support and comfort. In parallel with the music scene, which, no surprise, often centers around socializing and partying, Cedric also experienced periods of rather intense drinking. In addition to this, it is also believed that Cedric struggled with drug abuse, contributing to severe downturns in his life alongside depression. Being younger than Raymond, Cedric seemed to be very popular.
Once some drugs bite you, bro, you're had. You just hope for the best after that. I hate to hear it. A lot of people's lives get fucked up over it.
With the women around him, and in addition to this, seemed to perform better when it came to music. And both of these two things seemed to really upset Raymond. You see, while Mr. Muller had lost his wife and his children, and was also struggling to hold down any sort of romantic relationship, Cedric experienced no such problems. In fact, he would regularly bring back women to the shared apartment, and this would make Raymond extremely jealous. He was younger, more talented, more successful with the women, and the band seemed to absolutely adore him. And as a result, tension grew between both men. Their arguments made everyone around them increasingly worried, and over time, they all realized that something needed to be done for them to stop this war. Where Cedric insisted that Raymond should be the one to leave the band because he was the jealous one after all, Raymond insisted that Cedric should leave because he was the one with less experience. Either way, in an act of both pride and stubbornness, both men refused to back down. And so this long Cold War continued. And tragically, Raymond's jealousy, which continued to poison the atmosphere around them, would eventually come to a breaking point, and the consequences would be catastrophic.
Oh shit.
It was the beginning of July 2018. And the band was gearing up to play at a local pirate-themed festival. A kind of live-action roleplay event where people dress up, get into character, play music, and have a few beers.
Like
or
pirate
perhaps
larking?
more fittingly, some rum. Despite tension rising between Raymond and Cedric, the band had actually been rehearsing for this event for weeks. Unfortunately, it became quite obvious that Cedric was letting all of this get to him. I mean, he'd already snapped at the other bandmates over this time frame, and it was also apparent that he was going through something internally. But when July the 6th eventually rolled around, one of those band members seemed to be missing. Of course, that being the young Cedric Gagnon. This confused the other band members. For one, Sean Jones knew that Cedric was very passionate about the band, and that he would never intentionally miss a gig. But Sean also knew that Cedric was going through a particularly rough patch at the moment, filled with depression and alcohol. So with that in mind, he chalked it up to that. What was also bizarre was that Raymond's bass guitar seemed to be damaged. Even stranger, Raymond didn't seem to notice, and when asked about what happened to his guitar, he just shrugged it off. Regardless, their festivities carried on as planned. But that's not to say that, during this relatively carefree atmosphere, worry for Cedric's well-being lingered among the bandmates.
It's gonna get bad.
Fact,
It's
one
gonna
of them
get real
even
bad.
jokingly asked Raymond if he had killed Cedric. Little did they know that, deep down, Raymond was hiding.
Man, see, I'm not saying. I think a little bit of jealousy is okay. Like, I don't mean like in bad ways. Like, if it wasn't for jealousy and want and desire, people would never want to push themselves and try to do different and more and better things. If everyone was just okay with where they're at, nobody would ever try to move up and accomplish more shit. But there is a point to where it gets extremely, extremely unhealthy, and damn, bro, I think we flew past that shit.
A dark secret. Days slipped by without any contact from Cedric, because the man had seemingly vanished. The last person to have heard from him was his girlfriend on July the 2nd, who had received a text message from him just 4 days prior. The man seemed to be okay in these messages, but then all of a sudden turned radio silent. As the festival unfolded, many assumptions were made about Cedric. One being that he might be dealing with personal issues and had possibly gone back to Ottawa to see his daughter. But as the days passed by, turning into weeks and then into a month,
I mean, that's true too. Sometimes life just happens, and people just gotta handle things, and
there was still no trace of the man. His mother eventually took the step of filing a missing persons report to the police. However, given his homeless status, lack of address, and struggles with depression and alcohol, the authorities seemed rather hesitant with this challenge. 2 months passed by without any communication whatsoever, and although concerns did linger among those who knew him, it didn't seem to trigger any sort of investigation. But as with all stories, folks, all of that would change on August the 31st, 2018.
oh shit.
It was on this day that Raymond was planned to step in as the bass guitarist in Cedric's absence. But after Raymond failed to show up, Sean would visit the apartment on Bernard East Street to see what was wrong. Sean expected that Raymond had likely slept in after a heavy night of drinking. Sadly, he would be gravely mistaken. As he opened the door, silence enveloped the apartment, with no noise coming from the kitchen, bedroom, or living room. A hushed foreboding lingered in the air, but upon reaching the bathroom, that silence broke out into terror. The bathroom floor was covered in blood, and slumped in the bathtub was Raymond. Amongst the panic, Sean noticed that Raymond was actually still alive and breathing. He spurred into action and dialed 911 immediately in a desperate bid to save his friend's life. Time was still on their side, but not for long. Now, luckily, Raymond was stabilized at the scene, and then he was rushed to hospital for further care. However, he was accompanied by the police a mere few hours later, because, as it turns out, there was more going on behind the scenes. During their search of the apartment, an unusual discovery emerged. A book was found resting on the stove, harboring a dark note inside. The note was allegedly supposed to be Raymond's final words, which were dated August the 30th, 2018, just 1 day before his discovery. Within this letter, Raymond expressed profound remorse and guilt, and admitted to murdering Cedric. An excerpt from the note read, "I took my bass guitar and bludgeoned him to death. I then dragged his body into the bedroom, put him in the bathtub, and dismembered him. I put away what I could in the fridge and on the balcony, and then spent the day cleaning. What I stole from the world: a friend, a son, a father, a lover, a musician, in such a horrible way, deserves eternal punishment. I'd like to say sorry, but what good would that do? I went to find Cedric in my own way. In the note,
See, I like that part of it. I like that part of it. I would say sorry, but what's the point? Like, I hate it when you got caught and you're going to prison for the rest of your life, and that you want to turn to me and tell me you're sorry for taking my loved one's life or doing whatever the fuck it is you do. No, you keep your apology. You know what I mean? What does it mean at this point? Jack shit is what it means.
Raymond detailed how he attacked Cedric while he was asleep on the sofa, rendering him utterly defenseless in the assault. Quite bluntly, the young man never stood a chance. The story that Raymond portrayed would reveal that he had attempted to take his own life in the same bathtub he had dismembered his friend in, therefore making the so-called Rock Hotel an active crime scene. As a result, the apartment underwent a thorough research, revealing traces of Cedric's blood in chilling locations. This including the bathtub, the sofa where he had slept, and, shockingly, in the refrigerator and the freezer. Disturbingly, it unfolded that Raymond had dismembered his friend and bandmate using a grinder and a saw, storing the remains both in the kitchen and on the frigid balcony. But all of this would lead to one final question. Where were Cedric's remains now? The unsettling truth emerged when Raymond claimed that he had disposed of the dismembered body parts in various trash cans throughout the apartment. Given the 2 months since Cedric's disappearance, the collected trash had long been sent to the landfill, and regrettably, Cedric's remains were now entwined with layers of debris and garbage lost in the vastness of a landfill, forever beyond the reach of his grieving family and loved ones. Now, it's safe to say that Raymond's attempt at taking his own life was an obvious sign of guilt and remorse for his actions. Just 1 day after being discovered in critical condition in the bathtub, authorities interrogated him from his hospital bed. During his questioning, he once again confessed to his guilt, recounting fresh, grisly details of that fateful day. And would you believe it, that all of this was publicly recorded for the world to see.
So you took the bass guitar and you hit Cedric with the bass guitar?
Yeah.
Okay. Was he still on the couch at that time?
Yeah.
Was he awake at that time?
No.
Did you try to awake him?
No.
No. Do you recall on what part of the guitar you hit Cedric?
It was the side
The side of it?
of it. Side of
Do you recall how many times you hit him?
it. No.
Was it more than one?
Yeah, I think twice or 3 times.
Twice or 3 times? And on what part of his body did you hit him?
On his head.
On his head? Can you be more specific again? Was it in the forehead, around the eyes, the nose, the mouth?
On the forehead.
The forehead? Okay. Was he alive before?
I don't know, but I presume.
Why? Was he snoring, breathing?
No. Just lying there.
Just lying there?
Now, let's just state the obvious here. Raymond did in fact murder Cedric. It is quite
Okay.
clear to see that his jealousy and blind rage allowed him to murder a friend without much thought.
Where's the twist?
But despite this, he never actually gave a motive. Nobody could believe the news here. I mean, Sean, he knew that the two were not on the best of terms. But he didn't believe that Raymond had it in him. Sure, he was a little bit strange, but definitely not violent. With both a written and a taped confession, you would think that this case would be a slam dunk in court, right? Well, my friend, you would be forgiven for thinking so. It turns out, though, that without a body, it is extremely hard to convict someone for murder. I mean, we have seen it before with the case of Masumi Watanabe, but that...
Yeah, but doesn't there have to be like something? And was there enough blood to prove that they was dead? Ain't that another thing? Like, there has to be a certain amount of evidence to prove 100% for sure that they could not have lived through it, right? Am I an idiot? Do I just come up with stupid shit? Ain't that a thing? Ain't it? Is it? Was it? Could it be? Can we make it a thing if it's not? But I mean, I think that's how it goes. Like if, there's enough blood to prove that they could not have lived, period. It's still not, 100%, but the more things you have that add up that equals that no matter what, they would have never lived through it type of situation. Am I stupid? I'm just going to shut the fuck up now. Let's go.
Really was a rare case. And by the time his trial began, Raymond consulted a lawyer and made up an entirely new story, one that would hold for quite some time. Another problem was how his confession was extracted. Confessions not made in an official interrogation room or a courtroom are quite difficult to be made admissible in court. It was also apparent that Raymond was not in a strong state of mind after trying to take his own life. You can see in this video that his speech patterns and motor functions seemed quite sluggish and weak at best. Following this, Raymond also claimed that the written confession found on the stove was actually nothing more than writings and thoughts for a song that he was creating. He further claimed that he was merely expressing his severe remorse for driving his bandmate away. Friends had also noticed that Cedric was going through another downward spiral around the time that he had vanished. A call to a friend a month before his disappearance was especially troubling. In fact, she was actually quite taken aback to see him alive just a few days later. Conveniently for Raymond, it is not uncommon for individuals with suicidal tendencies, especially those susceptible to drugs, to vanish without warning. Anyway, Raymond claimed that he had harbored a sense of responsibility for Cedric's disappearance, this attributing to his own stress that then pushed him over the edge. As the trial unfolded, all of these mitigating factors had to be carefully weighed when determining Raymond's sentencing.
Yeah.
Initially scheduled to begin for May of 2021, the prosecution sought charges of both murder and causing indignity to a body due to dismemberment. Despite this, and perhaps no surprise, Raymond maintained his plea of not guilty. In his defense, Andrew Barbacki, who is Raymond's lawyer, presented a rather compelling case. He emphasized the fragile mental states of both Cedric and Raymond, highlighting the link between drugs and disappearances, and arguing that the note found was simply an expression of guilt. As Andrew would say to the courtroom, "We are swimming in darkness." Two suicidal people who consider themselves brothers is not a motive for murder. Raymond tried to persuade the jury that he was innocent, and that his writings and his attempts to take his own life were driven by good intentions. In addition to this, he also claimed that his writings were meant to bring attention to Cedric in hopes that he would eventually be found alive. But this argument made no sense whatsoever. I mean, why would you try to convince people that someone is dead and also claim this will help find them alive? As previously mentioned, Cedric's body was never actually recovered, making it impossible to establish the cause of his death. But that doesn't mean that Raymond was entirely off the hook. The initial trial unfolded over the course of 7 days, yet the jury's inability to reach a unanimous verdict led to the trial's indefinite suspension due to a lack of solid evidence. Almost a year later, Raymond would face a second trial, but this time, luck was not on his side. Despite Cedric's body never being found, a new jury would dismiss Raymond's account and reasoning as too implausible. Raymond's storyline presented in court appeared to be quite chaotic and inconsistent, especially when contrasted with his detailed written and videotaped confessions, which conveyed a more logical narrative. It would still take the jury 9 days to arrive at a unanimous decision. Raymond Henry Muller would be declared as guilty of the murder of Cedric Gagnon. As a result, he was given a life sentence with a minimum of 25 years before becoming eligible for parole.
Hell yeah.
In addition to this, he was given an extra 5 years for the indignity caused to Cedric's body following the murder. The judge would go on to say, "The significance of this charge is not the ultimate penalty, which is overshadowed by the sentence of life imprisonment." It is significant, however, in ensuring forever that Mr. Muller will be remembered not only for the murder of Cedric Gagnon, but also for his cold and calculated attempt to hide his heinous crime by a further heinous act. One that demonstrates an attitude totally opposite to the sensibilities of civilian law. And so, it turns out that Raymond's haphazard attempt to conceal his crime, even after confessing not once but twice, ultimately proved to be unsuccessful. This exposed the extent of his callousness, and his reluctance to take responsibility for his actions in the aftermath. Despite Cedric's tumultuous life, which is marked by homelessness, alcoholism, and drug abuse, at his core, he was a musician, a father, and a son. His bandmates affectionately described him as pirate to the core. The impact of Cedric's loss weighed heavily on his friends, who, despite his struggles, still recognize him as a genuinely caring person. Despite having little to offer, Cedric always did his best to support those he loved. With Cedric's remains never being recovered, the absence of closure in his death adds as an additional layer of tragedy for his loved ones. And the inability to mourn his loss compounds the challenges they face in coming to terms with this very heartbreaking situation. I always find these cases which lack any sense whatsoever to be the hardest ones to digest.
They are.
I mean, there was no real reason to kill Cedric.
No.
But as a result, there are two families without a father. Anyway, folks, I think I'm going to wrap this case up here today, but before...
Alright. I really enjoyed it. Adrian, you do an amazing job, bud. See, that's he'd be a good lawyer. Because now I'm kind of wondering, like, maybe the dude ain't like 100% guilty, you know what I mean? He kind of puts that doubt in your head. It's like, huh. I don't know. I really enjoyed today's video, though. If you all enjoyed it as much as I did, please go down there, leave a thumbs up. While you're down there, go on over, smack that subscribe button. Become part of the Built for 1,000 Nation. We do some crazy shit here. And if you want to know when that crazy shit happens, ding that bell. It might work for you. It might not. If it does, jump in on one of my premieres and chat with me over in the chat. Let me know. Just be like, hey, Bill, just wanted to let you know. It dinged, bro. I know you're going. I'm going to be like, cool, thank you. And if you really want to help to support the channel, links in the description. Go check out my store. Got some amazing merch. Some really good stuff is about ready to drop here before too much longer. You're definitely going to want to keep an eye out and check on it. As always, be good to one another. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Man, Adrian. Dude got beat to death by a fucking bass, homie. That ain't good. That's no bueno. He hit the wrong note.